It's finally premium collection time, but before we dive into those exciting things, we got a brand new Zorga to talk about as well.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Also, quick note before we head into this video, I'm currently live at twitch.tv/MrTimeleap going through my old collection, so if you guys want to look at old pretty pictures, or you want to discuss the latest development within the community, aka the latest reveals for premium collection and festival collection, then head over to twitch.tv/MrTimeleap and see me live and discuss the things as we go through our daily business. But further than that, I will not hold you up any longer. Let's go straight into these reveals. Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we got a very exciting one because not only do we see the very first reveal for the upcoming Festival Collection 2022, but also, probably more notable one here, Premium Collection 2022. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into these reveals and see what the new stuff for Vanguard has for us that's coming on the horizon. And we're gonna start off with, of course, the stuff for Festival Collection, which brings us to two new cards for Stoicheia. As already explained in the intro, it's new Zorga support. And the first brings us to this new grade 3, which is that C Spiritualist Grave equals Zorga. So yes, we have a brand new Zorga, which allows us to potentially replace the old Zorga. But, as you're gonna see in a second here, I don't think this card outright replaces him. This is basically a different Zorga, which allows you to take the deck in a different direction. Either you're gonna play a build with the old Zorga, or you might play a build with the new Zorga. So, what does this Zorga actually do different than the previous one? Well, for starters, it has the effect Continuous Vanguard Circle. If you did Alchemy Magic this turn, all of your front row units get power plus 5k. So, basically, every single time you Alchemy Magic, you get the mini persona right, essentially. And this is nice because that means that right on the very first grade 3 turn, you will generate some power buff. So if you go for a more aggressive Zorga build, this might be a nice option for that because you immediately start to make decent numbers. As keep in mind, we have a couple of 15k attackers, or we have the grade 3 dragon that becomes 18k if it resurrect. With this extra 5k, those become 20k or 23, and that makes magic numbers against a 10k if you went first, or against 13k if you went second. But besides the raw power, it also has another effect, which is a different take on the Alchemy Magic effect, which is act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost Soul plus 1, and discard a card from your hand. Choose a normal order from your drop, put it into your hand, and until the end of turn, when you would play a normal order, you can bind a normal order with a different card in from your drop and Alchemy Magic. So essentially, it allows you to turn any card from your hand into a normal order from your drop, and then you can perform the Alchemy Magic, essentially. Which is basically Alchemy Magic with extra cost. Now that sounds bad because the previous Zorga, the old Zorga, just had Alchemy Magic and you can Alchemy Magic whenever you want. It didn't have a preemptive cost, where this you need to Soul Blast 1. So that might sound bad, but this Zorga has a whole different twist to it, because this Zorga essentially turns the entire drop zone into actually a second hand, because now you can turn any card in your hand into any order in your drop. So the issue that you might not have an order card in your hand is non-existent for this Zorga build. So this might potentially fix a certain flaw of the previous Zorga. Now, that said, the old Zorga has a built-in resurrection of rearguard, so you have more pressure by aggroing the board, and you didn't have to preemptively pay a cost to access the Alchemy Magic mechanic. So if you don't have Soul, you're not really doing anything, and some of these strong orders like Spiritual Body Condensation also cost Soul. So we need to be careful with this particular Aura Zorga to not lose steam here. But that said, this Zorga actually combos extremely well with the Shadow Cloak Triple R Grade 2, because now you can essentially play an entire singleton array of orders, and that Grade 2 loads up the drop zone with your orders, and then with this Zorga you can fetch them back to your hand and essentially use them for Alchemy Magic. And because you can fetch an order from the drop into your hand, some orders you can use them infinitely during the entire game, because you can use them from hand, they go to the drop, next turn, get them back to your hand, so you don't have to bind them with the Alchemy Magic cost. So if there's a particular order you want to use every single turn over and over and over again, with this effect, you can. So depending on your playstyle, this could either be the better option for Zorga than the previous Zorga, but at the same time, it doesn't completely outcompete the old Zorga, because the old Zorga has some advantage to it with the fact that the Alchemagic mechanic is free, and you have a built-in resurrection, so if you need units, then that Zorga is potentially better depending on how you build the rest of your deck. So honestly, I like the direction they're taking with these cards, because if this is the direction for this set, we might see new versions of older boss units from archetypes that we might not have seen the grade 4 alternative. So we can see maybe a grade 3 for Nirvana, but they might just say, you know what, we're not going to make a new version of Bruce, Nirvana, Bastion, etc. And we're just going to focus on like Zorga, Hexorb Sorceress, maybe even Flagburka, etc. Basically the right lines that didn't get any new version of their grade 3. I'm very curious of what this set is in store for us, and this Zorga is a very nice start. But it's not the finish line yet, because we have another card for Stoicheia as well, which to some extent synergizes with this new Zorga, which is this grade 3 normal order in the likes of Clouded Miasma. And this normal order has the effect: play this with cost, counter +1, choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop, and call to the rearguard circle. If this is part of Alchemagic, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets continuous on Vanguard Circle. All of your front row units get power +5k until the end of turn. So essentially this is another Spiritual Body Condensation, but instead of paying a Soul Blast, you pay a Counter Blast. And on top of that, if you Alchemagic, you give your Vanguard the additional 5k power to your front row. This is basically to synergize with the new Zorga, because for one, it costs a Counter Blast instead of a Soul Blast, which then compensates for the fact that you already need to pay a Counter Blast to get resources or value of your Alchemagic. But it also resurrects a unit, which is essentially the same skill as a Zorga, or should I say the old Zorga had. But it also gives the extra 5k power. Thus, combining with the 5k power that Zorga already provides, makes it a +10k, which is a front row buff equal to Persona Riding or to Grief, Despair, and Rejection. So this combined with the new Zorga is somewhat similar to a combination between the Zorga Resurrection skill, Spiritual Body Condensation, and Grief, Despair, and Rejection, which is an interesting combo. Is this card going to be good? I don't know, because it's a discard and a counter blast for a Resurrection and +5k power to 3 units. Could be good, but also not. It all depends on the entire context of the new Zorga package. Now, that explained, you're here probably mainly for premium. So let's take a look at two new clans, or should I say the two new support waves for two clans, which are Shadow Paladin and Narukami. And yes, I know you might be wondering, why am I not tackling the Dimension Police support, which are the cards that the different fight released or revealed. Well, I'm gonna save that for a video for probably this Saturday, when I'm also going to tackle the cards that are going to be revealed by, I believe, the second person is going to reveal. Let me go back to my memory bank, which should be Commander Jaime. So expect a video probably this weekend tackling those two clans. So that said, let's dive into the ones for Shadow Paladin. And for Shadow Paladin, we got this new stride, which is Dark Knight Crom Crouch. And this grade 4 has the effect: act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost, retire 2 rearguards. Your opponent chooses up to 3 of their rearguards and retires them. If 3 cards were not retired until the end of turn, this unit gets auto on Vanguard Circle once a turn. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked, costs counter +1, and retire 2 rearguards and stand this unit. And power +10k. So essentially, this is basically trading 2 of your rearguards for 3 of your opponent's rearguards. But if you use this wisely and your opponent only has 2 rearguards, or you can snipe a couple of rearguards before you activate this skill, you can turn this into retire 4, that then retires potentially 2 of your opponent's rearguards, and you count +1 to resend your Vanguard to have a 25+ stride unit. So that, including the 13k base, is 38k Vanguard that swings twice without any other particular skill. This is honestly a very solid card to go into as a generic stride option. It gives every archetype or every build within Shadow Paladin a generic restander that isn't tailored to a hard card. I think Spectral Diablo was specifically for Diablo cards, or maybe Revengers or something. There was, I believe, a restriction to this card, and this is honestly very easy to fulfill. It retires a couple of cards, it gets a bunch of power, and it's honestly pretty solid. So in a scenario where Morpheus isn't great, or any other specific stride unit you focus your builds around, you can still go into this one. And yes, Rancor Chain is a thing. I believe that's a stride that copies a hard card that could combine with Mordred to also have a restanding Vanguard, or at least restanding your rearguards, and you could combine it with Raging Form. But then again, those restands or those multi-attacks heavily revolves around the hard card skill. This card doesn't care for that. So any archetype that hasn't any inherent multi-attack or restanding Vanguard, you can slap this card in your G-Zone and have a solid option for it, and is great against certain big boards or decks that don't heavily swarm the board as much. But, granted, the most competitive builds for Shadow Paladin still will heavily revolve around Morfessa, so this might not impact the scene all too much. That is not so much said for the G-Guard that Shadow Paladin got, because that G-Guard is kind of nutty. Because the G-Guard they got is Dark Dragon, Deep Griever Dragon, and this card has a very interesting skill, because it's auto. When a unit is placed on the Guardian Circle, choose up to 5 grade 1 cards from your drop and put them on the bottom of your deck in any order. This unit gets shield plus 5k until the end of that battle for each card put. So, you could give this thing plus 25k shield. So, it is a 40k shield on its own, and it also recycles your grade 1s back into your deck. Yes, it's anti-ritual, but for any build that doesn't rely on ritual, this is insane. But even in the ritual build, for Luard, for example, you can send back your grade 1 targets because your entire engine revolves around grade 1, so you reload your engine and your search abilities and search targets. So yeah, even that is still kind of crazy. But that's not even the entire thing, because if you shuffle back 5 cards, then it also has the secondary effect, which is cost, counter plus 1, choose one of your units, and it cannot be hit until the end of battle. Yes! As if Luard needed more perfect guards combined with Ezra's, they now have more perfect guards in the likes of this G-Guard. And on top of that, yes, you can guard 2 units with this. Because you can, if your opponent attacks into your column, you can guard this for the rear guard in the back, because its 40k shield will probably guard the attack. And then you can use the secondary effect to give your Vanguard the perfect guard effect. So if they hit criticals or over trigger, you're still Gucci and the attack won't hit. Honestly, this card is pretty good, and this will definitely impact the G-Zone for Shadow Paladin. The Stride is just a generic good card that can be used in any archetype. I probably won't see this being used all too often in the most competitive variant of Luard, but the G-Guard, pretty damn good. But that brings us to the second clan, and this is an interesting one, because on initial release, I thought this card was actually really bad. But the more I gave thought to it, this card becomes all the better, because we have Narukami, and for Narukami we've got this Stride, which is Conquering Supreme Dragon, Exterminate Dragon, and it has the effect, although when a unit is placed on the Vanguard Circle, cost Soul Blast 1 and draw a card for each of your opponent's front or open rearguard circle. So you could essentially Soul Blast 1, draw 2, if you're up against Axel this could be more. And then it also has the effect, although Vanguard Circle, once a turn costs Counter Blast 1, and all of your front row units get power plus 10k until the end of turn for each of your opponent's front row open rearguard circle. So this could essentially give your field plus 20k, maybe more if you're up against Axel. It's essentially Axel hate that we're used to with Narukami. It's always being very aggressive against Axel, but not so much against Force and Protect. And when I first saw this card, I thought this Stride is not all too great, because essentially it does nothing and it relies on your opponent not having a field, and that is probably not very likely, as they just call units, and because the on-place effect is on-place, not main phase, that means the draw is very unlikely. And yes, the extra power is nice, but it doesn't really do anything unless you have other rearguards that can retire stuff or bind stuff. But then I remember that Narukami has access to Stunverse, and essentially, to play around Stunverse, you mainly not gonna call a field, so they cannot Stunverse your board. So in order to play around Stunverse, you call nothing, which then plays right into Exterminate Dragon, thus your opponent can plus and get a buttload of power to the board. And yes, it's still just maybe 20k power to your front row. That does make your Vanguard quite sizable, because that is in itself 48k, or should I say 47 Excel numbers. But more importantly, Narukami has access to restanders. So those restanders will get double value of the power. So plus 20k to Choa, for example, or maybe plus 30k if you're up against an Excel deck, is pretty good. And this in itself is also extremely hate against any Axel spam deck. So Nightbird, for example, they're gonna hurt from this a lot. So depending on the meta, this card can be insane, and just in combination with Stunverse, this is going to be really good. So these two cards together means either your opponent has to play into this card, or they have to play into Stunverse, and they have to decide which is the worst one, or for them, the better one to play into, as it's the weakest stride of the two. Either one, the Narukami player is going to have a field day because they're going to get free value with these two bodies combined together. So overall, pretty decent stride. But then we also have the new G-Guard for Narukami, and the one that we got is actually kind of interesting because Narukami already has access to Disruptive G-Guard, and this is a new type of spin around it. As we have Sky Guardian Supreme Dragon Counteract Dragon, and it has the effect, although when the units put onto Guardian Circle, your opponent chooses up to 2 of their front row rear guards and bind them. If 2 cards were not bound until the end of the battle, this unit gets shield plus 10k, and if no cards were not bound, it gets shield plus 10k. So essentially, for every card your opponent does not choose to bind, you get plus 10k shield. So either they're gonna have a 15k shield on their face, but lose 2 front row units, which can equate to 2 attacks, or they're gonna lose 1 attacker, and this is 25k shield, or they're gonna lose no attacks, but this is 35k shield for free. Which honestly isn't that bad. It's the strongest G-Guard that Narukami has access to, and depending on the scenario, you might stop some attacks. Now, most likely in a lot of scenarios, your opponent is not gonna bind any of their rear guards, so this is gonna be 35k shield. But that means you have 35k shield, which can stop a lot of attacks. And in some instances, your opponent might be tempted to bind one of their units. So for example, your opponent attacks with the Vanguard, they might already attack with their rear guards, and you guard with this, and they're like, you know what, I want to force you to use more shield, so I'm gonna bind my own rear guards and just go into play. Because at the same time, that plays around Stunverse. But by doing that, they free up the board and basically play right into the new Exterminate Dragon. So it's an interesting take. You can either use this preemptively to either stop multiple attacks, or you can use this after the multi-attacks and then essentially set up for Exterminate Dragon. It's an interesting G-Guard, and depending on the scenario, this could be really solid. And that also concludes all the reviews that we saw so far. Yes, we went actually pretty fast over these strides. Usually these take a lot longer. But the interesting thing about the strides that we see so far is that they're pretty generic cards that have a very specific use case. In the likes of the Shadow Paladin, it's essentially if you cannot benefit from Morfessa or any of your key strides, and your opponent has 2 cards on the field. You can use those together to have a Resetting Vanguard for 1 Counterblast and 4 rearguards. And the interesting thing is, I forgot to mention, the stride doesn't lose drive checks. Those are 6 drive checks on a Resetting Vanguard with Incator Sanctuary. Pretty decent. And because you sack 2 rearguards in the main phase, you can repopulate the board, and the 2 sacks in the battle phase. I don't remember correctly if Shadow Paladin has some type of skill that once it's retired you can call a new card. If it has that, it can enable restands. Otherwise, it might not be the end of the world. You lose 2 units in the battle phase, but you get 6 drive checks. So that's essentially 4 extra cards in your hand, because you lose 2 of the 6. Still sounds a pretty good deal with the Resetting Vanguard that has 10k power on the very first swing, and then all the triggers on top of that can be even more power, and you have other effects within Shadow Paladin that can benefit from a Vanguard that resets, like Kahedin and Howell or something. I think those old OG cards synergize with Resetting Vanguards, but there's like a lot of interesting stuff you can do. And yeah, and same goes for Narukami Stride. It's a nice combination card with Stunverse, and I'm very curious of what the other cards are going to have in store for Premium Collection, because so far it looks to be like the power level is pretty nice. We have a lot of cards that work for a very specific use case. Also, they can be used as generic first strides, essentially. And we have to wait and see what the other clans have in store for us. I honestly cannot wait. And these cards so far, or the first couple of reveals, have been very spicy. And that combined with the new Zorga also have me excited for the festival collection, because that means we might see more new versions of boss units for the potential ride line, thus allowing even more variants of the respective ride lines. So whatever might be the case, premium or standard, and to some extent V premium once we get the second part of the reverse set later this year, looks to be very exciting. But other than that, that's been everything I want to talk about today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What you guys think of these new cards, as there's a lot to discuss and a lot to say. So let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!